Hello, this is Professor Tom Wolf. I'm really honored to be taking part again in the Ursula Tech capstone. This time we're going to create web pages, and we're going to start today. This is the first video, so let's just dive right in. We're going to start with an overview of what we're doing. We'll talk about privacy and copyright. Then we'll get right into the technologies we're going to use, HTML5 and Cascading Style Sheets 3. We'll end up creating a Netbeans page template that we'll use this week to create the pages of our website. And we'll create the first page of the site, which is the biography or kind of a splash or home page for the site. So for the overview, you're going to learn how to code HTML5 and CSS3 and use these to make websites. We'll use the free Netbeans editor. If you were here last time when we did the JavaScript, it's the same editor that we used for our greeting card app. And in fact, if you want, you can now personalize the greeting card app and change the colors and things like that and add it into your website if you like. And I'll have that available for you in the resources here. So you're going to create a personal website. The content and styling is going to be to your liking, so they're not going to all be the same. You have a different number of pages. You have a number of options. If you have work and portfolios you'd like to show, you can. If you have a resume or something like that, you can put that up. Although we'll talk about that, we have to be careful with things and what sort of content we put. At this point, as I'm recording this, I'm not sure where we're going to host this site. So in my initial discussion, it doesn't sound like Ursula has a web server that you can put your pages on. And so we'll likely have to find a free hosting site, and then you'll put the pages there. For right now, you can develop the pages locally on your computer and look at them, and that'll work fine. Okay? So this is going to work the same way it did before. Each day I'll have a video tutorial for you that'll be what we're going to do during the day's session. And you can find the tutorials in the Blackboard site for the capstone. There'll be a folder for each day. The idea is you should watch the videos before the session. And because this is going to be your own thing, in many cases you're going to need to bring content with you to use during the session. For instance, if you have pictures from a portfolio, you're going to have to bring those in to add them into a web page that includes them. There's going to be some additional links and resources in Blackboard if you want to learn more. I already have a bunch of videos on YouTube that I use when I teach these materials in my courses, so there's a lot of options here. Let's start first by talking a little bit about privacy and online safety. So to be safe, we want to be really careful about what we share on the web. Generally, anything you post is going to be there forever. It's literally impossible to get everything down. There are agents that automatically copy and archive the web. And once someone downloads something onto their machine, you have no control over it. So you have to be really careful about this. And you want to be especially careful about your contact information. So I recommend that you don't put anything more than your email. You would never put your phone number or your home address. And also, a lot of people like to have a second public email account that they use. For instance, your account could get overwhelmed with spam. That's one of the things the spammers do is they look at web pages and they harvest email accounts from them. So if you already have an email address that you use and all your friends have, you might want to just create a more public one to use for public type contact. Again, no home addresses or phone numbers. That makes you a target when you put stuff like that on the web. So you don't want to do that. You also need to be careful about revealing your schedule or what I call your itinerary. And so a few years ago, there used to be a site called robthishouse.com. And what would happen is there was some Autobots that would scan the internet. And if somebody mentioned that they were going to be away on vacation, it would figure that out and then it would post it on the site. Now, the person that did this as an education attempt. So he or she wanted to let people know that you have to be careful about that. So be smart about that. You don't want to reveal the kind of information that would allow some stranger to, for instance, know that you're going to be at a certain place at a certain time, or you're going to be away from your home at a certain time. Okay? One thing you have to be kind of careful about is when you post pictures, sometimes they will have the geolocation information. So if you're real careful not to post your home address, but you post a picture of your home and it's got the location in it, then that kind of defeats the whole purpose of being careful. So be very aware of that. I'll try and find some sort of a tool for you to remove that because generally when we take pictures with our phones and tablets and things like that, they include that information. Okay? All right. The other thing is just, I know many of you are very young, and I certainly was young at one time and had a wilder past. But nowadays, you want to be real careful not to post things that you might regret later. So, embarrassing photos or stories. You go to a party and maybe you're kind of wild. You don't want that on the internet. At some point, you're going to be wanting to try and get a job, and that's the kind of stuff that can keep you from being employed. The employer sees this and thinks that you're a party girl or boy, and that's it. You're not going to get hired. Also, you want to avoid being nasty or catty. Don't be doing the cyberbullying, and avoid crude content. Really, anything that's going to reflect negatively on you. You have to be careful here. This is a public forum. It's not the place to share private information and intimate information. Okay? And you want to also respect other people's privacy and safety as well. So, for instance, if you're at the party and you get funny pictures of Bill or Janet when they're acting out, do them a favor, don't put them online. Okay? These rules are even more important for the social networking sites like Facebook, Google+, etc. So we want you to be safe. I don't want to put the fear of God in you or anything like that. But you just have to be smart and think about these things. Unfortunately, your guys are coming to the age now where you can make choices that can negatively impact the rest of your life. And so, hate to say this, but time to wake up and be careful, okay? All right, we also want to talk a little bit about copyright. So you should only post content on your site that you have a right to use. And most of the popular images, videos, and songs are copyrighted, and you do not have permission to use them. And if the owner chooses to do so, they can sue you for using their content without reimbursing them for you. In recent years, the recording industry has been very aggressive about this to try to kind of, make an example of people who downloaded music without paying for it or videos, especially if they passed it on, okay? Now, that being said, there's plenty of free content that you can use. So you can use the Google search or other search engines and you look for royalty-free content or free content, and it's usually pretty clear that it's free for use. There's an alternative copyright called the Creative Commons, and that can include free material, and that can also include material where the owner allows you to use it as long as you credit them. So if you use a picture, you just indicate, hey, I got this picture from the artist that made it. I know we all take this for granted, but honestly, it's a real reasonable situation. We're talking about artists and creative people who invest their time to create their work. We love the work, but it's really reasonable that we give them some sort of compensation for using it. Unfortunately, a lot of people are very creative, find that they just can't make a go of it because the piracy is so rampant. So, for instance, one of my interests and hobbies is knitting. And I know that there are some knitting designers who have just given up totally putting any kind of designs online because as soon as they do, they're stolen and they end up on a pirate site and everybody downloads them for free instead of paying a nominal fee, $2 to $3 for a good knitting pattern. So that's really horrible. That's basically now gotten to the point in some cases where they can't make a living anymore by doing that. So then nobody can get the patterns at all, or they have to go and get them through old technology by buying a published book or something like that. So again, this is pretty reasonable. I know a lot of us kind of make a joke of it and kind of ignore it, but you shouldn't. And if nothing else, on your site, you don't want to use the copyrighted content because then you're liable to be sued for the royalties for using it. Okay, so let's be careful, and we can have fun, and you can create creative sites, and they can have whatever you want in them. Okay? All right, so let's start to talk now about the web technology. Websites are composed of linked documents, which we call web pages. They're single documents. These documents are in a text file format like you would make with a simple editor like Notepad in Windows, or I believe the editor in the Mac is called Type. And they're written in a markup language called HTML5. And then the styling is done with cascading style sheets, and the latest version of that is version 3. And the style information is in a separate file that's linked to the file that it applies to. So these sites are hosted on a web server. That means we place the files that compose the site on the web server. And when we publish the site, that's what we do. We have to put a copy of the files on the site. When the user clicks on a link or types the URL, that is the web address, into the browser requests the page from the server where it is, downloads it, and it might be multiple things. So for instance, each image on the web page will also be a separate download. So it does all the downloads needed to download all the content into the page, and then it renders and displays it in the web browser. So a typical site will have a single main or home or splash page, which we kind of think of as the entrance to the site. And that's the page that we're going to create today for your personal site. And often this main page has a file name of index.html. And depending on how the hosting works, you don't necessarily have to include that as part of the name. So that will depend on where we put the files. We'll look into that later on. So for right now, you can put the files locally on your computer and look at them there with the web browser. Excuse me. So HTML5, Hypertext Markup Language. This is version 5, which is the latest. A lot of times I'll just say HTML, but I'll be talking about the latest version, which is HTML5. This is not a programming language. It's quite different. If you were with me for the last technical capstone where we did the JavaScript, that was a programming language where we wrote actual code. The HTML markup is sometimes referred to as code, but it's really data language. So it just defines the page, the structure of the page, and the content. Okay? It's actually in a simple text format, which means you can open and read it with any basic text editor, Notepad, TypeScript, Notepad++, or we can use an elaborate IDE like Netbeans, which is what we're going to use. So HTML uses these tags, and tags are delimited by angle brackets. So if you look here in this slide, I have TAG, that would be a tag, and it has an opening and closing angle bracket. And tags can either be simple, which means that they're empty, and then they have a slash here, or they can be a paired tag. And when we have a paired tag, we call that an opening and closing tag. And the tags will be the same, except the closing tag will have the slash at the beginning. Okay? So here, slash tag 2 is the closing tag for this opening tag 2. And when we have a paired tag like this, it has content, and the content will go between the opening and closing tag. That could be other tags, that could be just text, could be something else. Okay? And then again, the content will be between the beginning and closing or ending tag. Okay? Sometimes we call paired tags container tags because they can contain content. Excuse me. Tags can also have attributes, and the attributes are only going to be in the head tag, or of course in the case of a singleton, they'll be in the first tag. But you never have attributes in a closing tag. Attributes always have this format: attribute value pair. So it's a key value pair. Here, this is going to be the key attribute. Then we have the equal sign, and then either singly or double quoted, we have the value. Now, the value might be more than one word. We might have multiple words in there, but it has to have this format. There's a couple exceptions to that. Sometimes we have tags that are basically true or false, and those can be single word tags. So for instance, like read only on an input form will just be the word read only. Okay, again, the attributes only appear in the opening tags and never in the closing ones. Some tags are structural tags and they only appear once in any document. You'll see how that works in a second. So here's our basic HTML5 document structure. We're going to create a oops, just dropped that. What was that? We're going to create a template to use so we don't have to repeat all this every time we create a new page. And so our template will have this basic structure, and then inside the body we'll have some additional content, which is a section structure. And that's not always the same. So there's an alternative there. You can have an article structure. You can also have a special aside structure, and we won't be using those. We're using the section style. So let's take a look at this. This first thing here is the document declaration, or the doc type. And that's very simple in HTML5. It's got that exclamation point, the word doc type in capitals, and then HTML. And notice that that in itself is styled as a tag, although that's a little different than a regular tag is in that it doesn't have the special closing slash. Okay? Then notice this. We have an opening tag, HTML, with an attribute. And then down here we have the closing tag. So the entire document goes between the open and closing HTML tag. The HTML tag has an attribute which is the language, and here EN indicates that it's English. Okay? Now look at this. Within the HTML we have two sections, the head and the body. And any HTML document will only have one HTML section and one head and one body. What goes in the head is called meta information. This is information about the document rather than the content of the document. And this first line here with the meta is the encoding of the character set. So you don't have to worry too much about that. It's boilerplate. That's UTF-8. That means single byte Unicode. And that's pretty standard. So most of the documents we work with are UTF-8. We also have a title. This is the title of the whole document. This won't show up in the web browser except in the window title bar of the web browser. It'll show the title there. Okay? Finally, we have this link, and this is the link to the connected style sheet, which is a file called main.css, and we'll build that today to work with our template. Basically, all the style information that styles this page will be in that external file. Okay? So then we have the body, and all the content for the page that the user can see in the web browser goes in the body. And we'll see in a second that we're going to use this section style, and it has a bit more structure. So if we look at our document structure again, the doc type is the first line. Then the entire page is in an HTML container, and it has a head and a body. Meta information goes in the head. All the content of our document goes within the body, and then the title goes in the head, and that'll be displayed on the title bar of the browser display window, not inside the window, okay? So often we'll create a duplicate of the title that will show up on the actual page, okay? And then finally, as I mentioned, that link element connects to an external style sheet that contains the information. And because of the way we've written that, that has to be in the same directory as the page we're looking at. Okay, here's this section. So as I mentioned, this is going to go completely within the open and closing body tag. So we have section, and that's a complete container. And then within section, we have a header, a main, and a footer. Most of our content is going to go here in the main. What we'll have in the header is a display title that usually corresponds to the title of the page. And this is done with a level 1 heading. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Right now we don't have any navigation elements, but it's common to put them in the header too. You can also put those in the footer for a different style of design. So these are going to be hyperlinks that connect the different pages within our website to one another. And right now we don't have any of those. Similarly, right now we don't have any content here in the page. One thing I want to mention is that we have an ID here on the main section. That'll probably be different for each page in our site. And because the first page is going to be our splash page and have a little bit of information about us, we're calling that bio. Okay? So we're going to put all this together here in a second when we go ahead and create the template. Okay, let's talk a little bit about these headings. So you noticed in the last one I had a level 1 heading, which is H1. The headings run from H1 to the smallest, which is H6. These, and basically they always match. So if I have a level 1 heading, it begins with an H1 tag and ends with an H1 tag, right? And again, I can have information in here in the form of attribute value pairs, okay? So here I have 2 headings, a level 1 and a level 2. And it turns out that headings are block elements. So when the web browser displays a block element, it puts a new line in and it goes down to the next line to display the elements that follow it. So both of these are block elements, okay? You can't really put any other tags inside the H1. And I don't want you to confuse the heading, H1 through 6, with the head or the header, which are part of the document, okay? Okay, here's how this actually looks. So here's the H1 text, here's the H2. Now on the surface you might say, hey Tom, the only difference is the size of the text. That's true by default, but that's not why we do this. The idea is that these are sections. So the H1 is like the title section, and then subsections of my page are going to be H2. So normally I wouldn't have by Tom Wolfe as a subsection. It doesn't really make sense. So really you don't see too many of these headings other than H1 in most documents. The kind of documents that have a lot of headings with a lot of different sublevels are really elaborate documents like contracts, legal papers, bylaws, constitutions, things of that nature. Okay? So we're really just going to use H1, maybe H2. Now, because we're going to be putting text on our home page where we write some text about ourselves, we'll use the paragraph tag as well. And this tag is just a P, a beginning P, and again, closing. And the paragraph text will go in here between the opening and closing tag. And this is a block element. So that'll cause the browser to render an end of the line and then insert the next paragraph or item on the next blank line. So it's kind of like hitting the return or enter key when you're typing in Microsoft Word. Okay? We also have a break tag which creates an end of line, but it doesn't insert a new line. Generally, you should use the break tag not for text, but for other elements, except if you're doing a poem or a song, the stanzas are going to be in paragraphs, and then the lines that make up the stanza will end with the BR tag. Notice that the BR tag is a singleton tag, so it doesn't have an opening and closing tag. It just has this single tag, and it's actually optional to have that backslash like that, but I recommend that you do because there's another technology we use with the web pages, and that'll make it work with that technology. Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to use cascading style sheets, and the latest version of that is 3. That's what we'll be using. And we use that to style the information in our web pages. So one of the important things in web design is to separate the content, which goes in the HTML, from the styling, the way the content is presented, which goes in the cascading style sheet. So that's what we're going to do. Okay? So I mentioned before that an element can have an ID attribute. And when you put an image of yourself, a photo, or an avatar image of some kind on your main page, you're going to use this image tag, and it'll have an ID of biopic. And notice how I've written that. That's called camel case, where the first word is lowercase, and then all the subsequent words are the first letter is capitalized. So I have biopic, and here even my image file, my image, is done in camel case too. So here biopic is an ID. That has to be unique to the file that it's in, and normally that means unique to the page, and that's kind of what we're going to do here. So if I have another image on the page, it would have a different ID. Okay? Again, the source here is the name of the actual file that has the image data in it. So this is going to be in the same directory as my index.html file that we're looking at here, and I'll have this picture of myself, which happens to be a JPEG called my image. Now, we'll talk about images in a lot more detail later, but because we're doing this right away with our main page, we want to kind of understand a little bit about it now. So you can use JPEG, a GIF, GIF. You can also spell JPEG differently. JPEG is often there. GIF is GIF. There's also the Windows bitmap, BMP. You can use those. And there's another file type, PNG, and another one called SVG. And so any of those types will work in HTML. Okay? Really what I'm mainly concerned about now is that when we use this ID, we can create the style in the CSS, and that's called an ID selector. So here I have this ID of biopic for my image, and then the code in the CSS to style it will be # biopic, and then here I have a curly brace block, and I'll have my style rules in that block. And those will be the rules. I can have one rule or many that apply to this image, and that's how I'm going to do the styling. Now that's for one for one. So those are going to be rules that are only for one thing because it's an ID. I can only have one thing with that ID. I can also use what's known as a class selector. And so the paragraphs that I'm going to have in my bio, I might want them to all have the same class, so they're styled the same way. So here's an example of one way to do that. So I would say paragraph, then class equals norm text. Again, notice the camel case there. Whatever the content of the paragraph is, and then the closing paragraph. And then in my style sheet, I have p.norm text. This is a rule that applies to a paragraph when it is of the norm text class. And then again, the style rules, one or many, can all go here in the curly braces. Okay? So if we look at that, here's how and this is the information that's going to be in the CSS file. So the style rules have this format. They're attribute value pairs. The attributes are already defined, so this is a placeholder for whatever attribute you're talking about. You can think of this colon as the equivalent of an equal sign, but you have to use the colon, and to make it readable you want to put a space in here, and then the value will differ. Although you don't have to when you have a single one. When you have multiple ones, you have to put a semicolon. So it's kind of smart to just get in the habit of always putting the semicolon in. So here's an actual example. This is going to set the background color on the body of my document, which means the entire document, to yellow. Okay? Similarly, this is an ID selector, and it's only going to apply to the image called biopic that has that ID. It'll constrain the width of the image to be 25%, which means 25% of the container it's in, which is the page. So as I resize the page, the image will shrink to keep that size. Okay? And if I picked a very small image, it would actually expand it to make it be 25%. I've put some padding around here. That's just blank space around the image, and that keeps the text from butting up against the image. And this unit here, 1 EM, means 1 character width. Okay. Finally, I put a border around the image, and it's going to be 2 pixels wide. That's the width of the line that draws the border. It's going to be solid. That's the style of the border, so I have different styles. And we'll look at this in detail more later. And then the color of the border will be blue. Now, obviously, if I wanted to change any of these, I could. So I could make this yellow, although it wouldn't show up on my background then. And then finally, I have the border radius. This is 15 pixels. And that basically gives my border rounded corners. If I don't put that in, the border will be square. Okay, so that will round the corners, and I'll have to look. I might not like that. I might play with that. So pixels are basically the little dots that make up the screen, and then an EM is a character unit. So 1 EM is the width of 1 character. Okay, and then percents usually refer to the container that the element is in. So here, this refers to the main section of the page because the biopic image is there. Okay, real quickly, here's some style rules for my normal text. So I set the text color to be red. I'm not setting the background color, and it'll default to the background of the page, which I set to be yellow. The font size is 1 character, which is the standard size. And then the font style is italic. And what I haven't done here is I haven't set what font I'm using. So we will do that in the actual hands-on. But for explaining how the CSS works, I didn't put that in. So you can't have anything except these rules in the CSS. So only this, well, really this stuff here is what's allowed. Okay, whoops, didn't mean to do that. So for instance, these notes would not be in the file. Also, just to save you some trouble, no HTML tags in the CSS file. Okay? All right. So now I think we're ready to go ahead and do our hands-on and create our page template in Netbeans, and then hopefully create the main page of our site. So let me pause this for a second. Okay, so I've opened Netbeans up. You should have this installed, and I think Marjorie will know how to do that and help you with that. Now, this might be a little different than what you're seeing. So these are basically projects that I've been working on, so obviously you won't have those. One other thing is when you first do something in Netbeans, sometimes you have to install the plugin for it. So I've already done that here, but I'm going to try to explain how to do that for you. And I can't really show you because I'd have to do a fresh install of Netbeans to show you, and that's way too much. So I'm going to come up here to Tools, and I'm going to go to Plugins, and then it will basically show me the install plugins, and that's all of these, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the available plugins, go on down to the HTML. Now, the problem is I don't think it's going to show these here for me because I already have them installed. I think if we click on name, it'll search. Good. So it just sorted them, and we come down. So you can see that the HTML ones are mostly not here because they're already being used. So I don't have the HTML UI. So let's look at the ones I have installed. And basically what you need for what we're doing is the HTML5 there, okay? It might be that this is a little different when we get into class and I figure out there's one I'm using that I don't know about, okay? So don't worry too much about that. We'll do this the first day of class. It's a one-time thing. Once you do it, you're good to go, okay? Okay, let's go ahead and start our template. So again, when you're in class, they'll explain about where to put things. But in general, what you want to do is you want to create one working directory and maybe create a new folder for each day. You're going to keep using the same code over and over, so you'll add to it. But it's sort of smart to make a new copy for each day. So if you screw it up, then you've got a good copy of what you did before. Okay? So I'm going to go to the File menu. And I'm going to create a new project, and then I'm going to come down here, and there's the HTML5. Now right here, if you don't see this, then you have to use that plugins thing I was telling you about and I just showed you. So I go to the HTML5, and then I say HTML5 application. I hit next, and I can use the browse now to tell it where to put this. And let me just play with mine a little bit real quick because I'm going to actually run through this now with you, and I want this. So I'm going to jump up here, and I have a working directory called the website course that I'm using. So I'm going to create a new directory there for my template code. Okay? So I'm going to call this template. And then I'll go into templates, so Netbeans will create the new project there. And then I'm going to call this HTML5 template. And then I'm going to click Finish. Okay? So here's the basic template, and I can go ahead and get rid of this. I don't need to have that in my template. That's some code from Netbeans telling me how I can do things. And basically right off I see that I've got my doc type that we talked about. There's the HTML container. There's the head and the body. And this is good. It put the viewport in. I forgot to put that in the slide, so that's really good. We want to leave that in. That makes our web page work better when it's on a mobile device like a phone. Okay? So let's go ahead and start changing this to make the template that we're going to use day to day as we go through the web course. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put the language in here. So and you can see it's here on this drop down. So Netbeans is pretty smart. It knows a lot about the HTML. So I'll double click on the language, and then I'm going to put EN in for English. Okay? All right, remember I had that link here for my CSS? I'm going to show you a real easy way to make that. So let's go over here to our site root, right click, and say New, and then we want to grab a Cascading style sheet file, and we want to call this main, M-A-I-N, should be lowercase, and then we're just going to hit Finish. So now this is the main CSS file. We'll come back and put some content in here, but you can get rid of this right off. So it's an empty file now. And now I'm going to go on back to my index.html. You see how I'm using the tabs to move between the files? Good. Okay. All right. Now I want to drag the main in here, and Netbeans will make the link for me. So I'm just going to grab it over here. And I want to make sure I get it in the right place. It needs to go in the head. I can put it up here. There we go. So notice how what you saw previously. So it says link href equals main.css. That's the name of the file. And then relation equals style sheet. It's always the same. Type equals text CSS. That's always the same. So I've got this now. And now I'm ready to go further with this. All right. So let's go ahead and copy and delete. So you just hit the delete key, select and hit delete. And now we're going to build our section header structure. And one of the things I recommend is when you do this, because the tags have to be opened and closed, it's sort of smart to wind them inside out. So watch me do this for the first one. So I'll go ahead and start typing the section tag. And as soon as I do that, Netbeans prompts me for that. So now I can just hit enter and put it in. And now if I close that off, it immediately prompts me to put the closing tag in. So I'll go ahead and hit enter again, and I have the opening and closing tag. And notice that my insertion point is right there between the two, so I simply hit enter a few times to make some space. Now this next part is the header, and you can see it comes up, so I'll go ahead and select it, and I'll hit the close, so now there's my header. For right now, I'll leave that empty. Let's go on down now and do the main. So main, whoops, I misspelled it. There we go, main, close. Again, hit enter to put the closing tag in. And then let's go ahead and put in our footer, okay? And then again, I'll hit that, okay? All right, let's go back up to the header. And we're going to have a level 1 heading here, H1. And if you want, you could go ahead and give this an ID. So we could say ID equals title. We might not need that, but let's do that in case we do. And what we would use that for is to put style on there, okay? Notice it's prompting me again for the closing tag. Go ahead and put that in. And now you can put the title in here. The problem if you do is it'll use that for every page. So because this is going to be a template, every time I use it, I'm going to go up here and change this title, which is going to appear up here, and this title, which is going to appear at the top inside the browser window. So it doesn't really pay to change that here in the template. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and just put a couple of lines in here for main. I just hit enter, and we can do our footer here. So what I'm going to do in the footer, and I forgot to cover this in the slides, but it's pretty simple. We're going to go ahead and put a horizontal rule like this, and that's going to put a line across the screen, and then right below the line I'm going to put my copyright, and you do that with a, and you see it there, and copy. So if we just put that in, that's kind of a, what is that called? I've forgotten. A meta character. And what that'll do is this symbol will, this code here will be displayed as the copyright symbol. So I'm going to put a space in and then 2015 and my name. And that's what you're going to want on yours, okay? All right. And so that's going to be on every page, so we want that like that, okay? So this is pretty good shape. And let's go ahead and just take a quick look at our page. I'll show you how to do that. If you come over here, you should see all the browsers that are installed. I forgot to tell Marjorie, but I'm guessing you're going to have Chrome, IE, and Firefox. I'm going to use Firefox here. And then when I hit the green button, it will display my page in Firefox. And there's not a whole lot there yet, okay? So you can see the only thing that was showing up yet is the copyright and that horizontal rule that I put in. And as I add content, it's going to go right up here before this footer there. So right now, really, the only thing we can see is the footer. Now, that's what we want because we're going to use this as a template to create all the pages in the site. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and close this. Just hit the little X, and that'll take us back to Netbeans. And now I think we're about ready to go ahead and create our page. So what we want to do now is we want to save this as a template. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not sure if I click here or here. So let me just see this. Yeah, so you click on the project there at the very top, save as template, and and you want all this checked, you can give it the template name. So this is single page template. All right, and that's good enough. And now that's going to put that in a particular place, which won't matter because Netbeans will look for that every time. But you could actually change that if you want. I recommend that you don't bother to change that. So I'll go ahead and hit finish. Okay, so now basically now I'm ready to use my template to create my first page. So let's go ahead and right click and close the template. That way we won't get confused. We also don't really need the start page, so we can go ahead and close that too. All right, now I want to say File, New Project, HTML5, HTML5 Application. I'm going to hit Next, and now I'm going to give it a name. Now this is going to be my website. So I'm going to put this in the Day 1 folder because that's what we're doing today. And if you want, you can just say My Site. That'll be fine. And now see how that's pointing to my template directly? I'm going to change that. So I copied the template into the template directory. This I want to have in my website course in a Day 1 folder. So now I'm going to create the Day 1 folder, Day 01, go inside the folder, and then just go ahead and create the page, say Open, My Site. Then I go to Next. Now watch this. You see where it says No Site Template? We want to get a template. So hit that, come over here and drop this down. And I have a couple of template that I previously did for some other work. But this is the one that I just made, single page template. So I'll go ahead and hit that. And then really I'm done, so I can just hit Finish. Okay? All right, now this is the web page for my site. So now I'm going to make this a permanent page in the site. So I'll change the title, and you can name this whatever you want, but it sort of makes sense that it would have the name, your name here. So Tom Wolf's web page, website, whatever you like. And then again down here in the header, I want to also put that there, okay? So Tom Wolf's. I don't have to make them exactly the same, but it kind of makes sense that they are, okay? Hey, how about this? I'll call this my lair. So Tom Wolf's lair, okay? It's a little joke of my last name. Okay, I'm going to hit Control-S to save this. And now we can look and see what we got. So again, I'll click the green arrow. It's still set on Firefox. Whoops. Looks like it went to Chrome, actually. So this is a little note. And I'm using Chrome. I've got it open with some other stuff. Let me close this and minimize this. And let's go back and again set it to Firefox. Chrome has a special connection with Netbeans that lets you run the JavaScript code, and we don't really need that yet, so we can just use Firefox for now. Okay, so I reset it to Firefox. Here we go. So now this is the level 1 header in the heading of my page, and there's the footer. There's still no content in the content area. Okay, all right, let's come on back. And so now I need to do a few things here, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to have paragraphs in here that describe myself. So this is going to be the text that the user will read, and I want to put an image in here of myself too for my home page. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and just start with some of the paragraphs. So I'll put a P in, and now I want these to all have the same class so I can put style on them. And I can either use norm text, which will be something I'll use throughout the site, or I could set a special rule for just the text on this page. Let's do that, and so we'll call this bio text. So bio text, so P class equals bio text, and then I'll go ahead and close that. And again, as soon as Netbeans asks for a closing tag, I'll go ahead and put it in. That's how I won't forget to do that. and I'll make sure that all my tags are properly closed. Okay, what's going to go in here is my text. So I might say something like, I am a professor at the University of, let's just say UC, at UC. Okay. Now, obviously, I don't want to spend a bunch of time writing my bio here. And the idea is that you came prepared and you have this. So you can copy your text paragraphs from Microsoft Word and simply put the text from each paragraph in here between the paragraph tags. So maybe something that would make a little bit more sense is for me, before I put any content in here, to make a bunch of these, at least 2 or 3, okay? So I'll paste 3 in, and then I'll put my text in here, okay? Whoops, I made a mistake. I don't want to put the content, the markup in there. I want to put my content. So I'm a UC prof. Notice how that got shorter each time. Okay, so hit Control S to save. And right now I don't have any more paragraph info, but I put it all in here. Later on I'll fill this out, but you don't need to watch that. It's just a waste of your time here. And likewise, you can do this at home. You can have your paragraphs ready to go when you come into class. You don't want to be sitting there in the session trying to think about what to put in the page. Okay, so here's my content, Tom Wolf's layer, and then I have my footer. So we're coming along here. So let's go ahead now and go to our CSS. And because that's not open yet, I'll double click on it over here, and that'll open in a new tab. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's put a background color on the page. So I'm going to do that on the body. So body, that's called a selector. And because that matches an element, that's called an element selector. And then I have the curly brace block for the rules. And I'll hit the enter key to move that down, and then I can put the rules here. I usually put one on the first line, but you can also do it this way. You do want to indent the rules, and you also only want to put one rule per line. So this is going to be background dash color, and I'll put the comma in, colon in, and I think there's some way in Netbeans for me to get the color. Oh, here we go. So there is an elaborate color chooser, and I'll have to figure out how to do that and show that to you. But you can see that it's also just giving me this huge drop-down list of colors. Let's try a little experiment here. I think tab might, yeah, doing the tab. There we go. So let me do that again for you here. So if I go ahead and type in the colon and then hit tab, it'll pop up the color chooser. And notice I have these different swatches. So this is the RGB, and then that's the HSL. These are all different color systems, HDSV, CMYK, and then the original swatches, which is, I guess, combined. Okay, so you can browse around through here or any one of these, and if you do that and you hit OK, it'll insert the color. Now that'll be a number, and that probably won't make any sense to you here, okay? But that's all right. Now that's not what I want, so let me go ahead and put that on there. You can also use most color names. So I'm going to go ahead and just put yellow in here, and then I put a semicolon. And now I also want to put margins on my body, and those are going to be relatively small, but that'll prevent the content from butting up against the window of the browser. So that's always a good idea. So margin dash left colon, and I usually use either a percentage or the EM units. Today I'm going to use the EM units. So let's say 2 characters, 2 EM. And now I can save a little time by copying this, Control C, pasting it, Control V, and then changing this to right. I don't really need a margin at the top or the bottom. I kind of consider that that wastes space. So this is what I'm going to do. Okay, I've saved this with Control S. Let me run the page again, and now we should see the background color. And there it is. You can see I have the yellow background. And also, look how the margin now is there. So before that didn't look very nice where it ran right up against the border, the edge of the browser window. So that's kind of cool. Okay? All right, so now we're coming along here. Let's click back on our index.html. So we have the bio text. Now, if you haven't already, I'm going to assume that you've pasted in a bunch of text here so we can actually write the rules for the bio text class selector. So if we go back to our CSS, an element selector is simply an element name, and this particular element, the body, only occurs one time in any page. A class selector is an element selector, like P here, paragraph, that also has the type of text class. So biotext is what I used. So here, P biotext will just be the paragraphs that I said are class equals biotext. And those are the ones that we have so far, okay? Just to kind of show you how this is going to work, later on I'll have what I call norm text. And that'll be a different kind of text, and it'll have different styles. Okay? But right now I don't have that in any of my pages. So again, I'm going to move my insertion point back here between the curly braces, and I'm going to go ahead and hit enter to insert some space. Okay. One of the things I can do right off is I can set the size of my font. So font dot size, and we'll go ahead and pick that up from the browser there. And again, it put the space in. So you want to always put a space after the colon just to make it readable. And normally when we do the size, we should use the character units. So if I do 1 EM, that's sort of the default size. That'll work for now. Later on, I might want to make it bigger. Also, for my bio text, I'm going to put a font style in, and this is going to be italic. And so notice the drop-down thing here. So this is how I can do italic or oblique, which is backwards. So italic leans to the left, oblique leans to the right. There's some other stuff in there we won't worry about, okay? So I'm not going to be able to teach you every last thing about HTML and CSS. We're just going to learn the stuff that we can use, okay? I might also want to set the font color, and that's just the color. So color is a more general value that works the same way as background color. I can hit the tab, and whoops, why isn't that working here? Oh, there it goes. So there's my color picker, or I can use a value here. Okay, so I can type it in. I think somewhere in this bluish area. One thing I'll share with you is I am not real good with colors. I'm actually red-green colorblind and have almost no fashion sense. So often I will use something called a color scheme generator, much like what you find in Microsoft Office, where it'll pick colors that work together. So looking at this, my font size is 1 EM, my font style is italic, and my color is blue. So Control S to save, and I'll go ahead and display the page. And so now you can see that I have styled my text here. I'm a UC Prof, and it's blue, and it's 1 EM, and it's on the yellow background, which is on the body. Okay, so we're coming along here. Now, I'm sure that you want to be able to play with your font style too. So let's do one more here. And I'm just going to put it up here just because I'm a little anal like that. But we want to do font family. Okay? And hopefully this will give me some kind of drop down here. Yes. There we go. Okay. So I was really hoping for more information here. There's a lot of different choices here. I'm going to go ahead and use one of the ones that I use all the time. Now, it turns out that if you have a font that has spaces in the name, you have to quote it with double quotes. So I'm going to do that here. Oh, it's not letting me. There we go. I'm running on Google Drive here, and every once in a while the connection to the drive fails. Okay, so font family, and this is going to be, is it Comic Sans MS? Yeah, I believe so. So Comic Sans MS. And normally when we do fonts, we put several there, so it'll default. If it doesn't show one, it'll show the next. But here I'm pretty sure that it should have the Comic Sans. While I'm here, I'm going to make this bigger just so it'll look better in the browser. So I'll make it 2EM. Should be twice as big now. Okay, I've saved this. Let's go ahead and there we go. So I'm a UC prof, and now this is actually bigger than my header there, okay? So I might want to do some stuff there and go ahead and style the header as well. Before we do that, let's leave that. Let's go ahead and finish what I intended to do. I'm not sure. I don't want to run too far here on this. And I noticed that I'm just over an hour already, so we need to watch that. We don't want it too long for you. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put an image in here. And so this is going to be IMG. And then this is also going to have an ID of biopic, B-I-O-P-I-C with a capital P. And I have no idea what that add to projects dictionary thing is. Whoops, oh, I see, I got a mistake in here. So this should be ID equals, and then it has to be quoted. There we go. Okay, so image ID equals biopic, source equals, and then that has to be the name of the image file. Now, you know, I meant to get that ready to go and I didn't, so I'm probably going to have to pause the video and grab my image and put it in there. So let me go ahead, Control S, and save this, and I'll pause this for a second. I'll get my image and put it in the file. So I'm actually working under Windows. I don't think it'll matter. I think most of you will too. If you're working on the Mac, it should be about the same though. So what I did is I found the picture that I wanted to use, and I'm going to paste it into the project now. And so I went up here and clicked on Files, and originally this was all minimized like this. So I expanded it, and down here, this public HTML, it was like that, and I expanded that. And I want the picture to go right in here. So I'm going to right-click here. I'm sorry, left-click here. And again, I've already been in the OS, and I copied the picture, so it's in the buffer. So I can right-click and paste. And that will paste the picture in. And so you can see the name of the picture is Tom Red Hat Wizard BB JPEG. Don't worry about all that. And then it's actually showing me the picture here because I have it selected now here in the file menu. So I think that I can, what I want to do is I want to get that name over here, and let's see if it'll just do that for me. So I'm going to go ahead and see if it'll put that in there for me. All right, it didn't quite do what I wanted to. It created a new image tag for the picture. That's good though. So one of the nice things about that is I didn't have to try to painfully spell the name of that image and get it right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this ID and just drag it down here, and then I can go ahead and get rid of this. So because each image element is a separate image. I only have one, so I only need one here. Okay, now look at this down here. You see this alt? That is alternative text, which might be used by somebody who is looking at the page but has an issue with accessibility. So for instance, a person who has visual impairment, they might be perceiving the page through an assistive reader. And so it's a good idea for me to always provide alternate text for this. So if I just put something like picture of Tom Wolf with his wizard hat, Okay, and again, most people won't see that, but if the person that needs it, that'll be good. Okay, let's go ahead and save this, Control S, and now of course we want to look at our page. So let's see, there we go. So you can see that here's the picture and here's the text. I gotta fix this here, and I'm gonna change the size of the picture, the text. That's just too big. So let's make that 1.5. That's in the style sheet. So go over here and we'll set that to 1.5 EM. That reduces it by a quarter of what it is. And see, I don't have any norm text in there yet, so there's no point in putting anything there. Let's just see how that looks. Okay, yeah, it's getting better. This still doesn't work very well. Like, it doesn't really make sense for the title of the page to be about the same size as the content. Remember, this is going to be like several paragraphs, and in that case, it'll be more like this style here, this size. So I probably should back it down even further and make it one. I'm going to leave it that way for now, though. There's a couple other things I want to do real quickly. I don't want to run out of time here. And let's go ahead and in the style sheet, let's go ahead and float the picture. So the bio text, I'm sorry. Oh, I don't have any style yet for the image, do I? Oh, we have to put that in. Okay, so this is an image element, so that's going to be IMG, and that would be a rule that would apply to all images. And then if I had a class, I'd use dot. But here I'm going to use the selector again. So let me just do that with the pound sign, and I called it biopic. And notice that I have that camel case. It's really important that I match the spelling. All right? All right, so one of the things we want to do here is I want to constrain the size. So I'm going to say max width. And it's kind of weird, but I'm not going to actually play with the height. I'm only going to play with the width. So max width equals 25%. And then I also want to go ahead and put a border around this. So border equals colon, that is. And then the way this works is it's going to be the width of the border. Let's try 2px. The style, which is solid. And then the color, and I'm going to use the blue again. Okay. And oh, and I also need to put padding around the image too. So I'm going to go up here and do that. Padding, and I can do padding left, right, top, or bottom, or just padding for all four. So really I want the padding all the way around here. Let's make that 0.5 EM, that's half a character. So we'll save this. And then we'll come on back here and run the page. And there we go. So you can see I have this nice border around my image. And if I wanted it wider, I could set it. Right now it's, I think, 2px. And then now the other thing I want to do is I want to give the border rounded corners. So I'm going to do that too. So let's come in here. And right after the border, it doesn't matter what order these are in, by the way, but it kind of, you want to do it in a logical way just to make it easy to read. Okay, so border radius, and then let's try 15 pixels for that, and then and I'm just going to adjust that by look and feel. I don't know if that's going to work or not yet. Okay, well, there we go. That works pretty nice. So I like that. So I'm going to keep that. Okay. All right, now one other thing I'm going to do, and this you won't see very well because I don't have any text in here yet, but I'm going to float the image, and that should make the text flow around the image. So I'm going to go ahead and let's try this float right, and we'll try that first. And again, Control S to save the file. I just save after I put everything in there. I think Netbeans might save when I put the green arrow. Okay, that's working pretty well. So it's actually flowed the image over to the right, and it kind of moved it outside of all of the text. This is really hard to see when the text is so brief like this. I mean, if I had my full 3 or 4 paragraphs talking about myself, it would make more sense. I'm going to go ahead and try it the other way and float it left. Unfortunately, doing it to center it is a lot more elaborate. So there is no float center. So you can float left or right. Okay? All right, so there we go. Now, one thing that I see is this is running right up against this. So I need to put some margins around the image to put some space between the border and the adjacent content. So I'll go ahead and add the margin in. And basically here I'm going to go ahead and just put margin on all 4 sides. So I'll just say margin. If I wanted to specify different values, I could do margin dash top, dash left, dash right, and dash bottom. Okay? So margin, and I kind of like that 0.5 EM, but let's make it a little bit bigger. So basically, I think that'll look nice, where I'll have the margin a little bit bigger than the padding between the border and the image. All right, here we go. All right, so again, you can see that I just added this margin in here, okay? Now again, if you did this and you have a bunch of paragraphs, this is all going to roll down like this, okay? So we'll be in pretty good shape. And there's actually a way that I can force this heading to be at the very bottom of the page. I'm not going to do that yet. What I will probably do before we continue is I'll add my paragraphs in. There's no point in you watching me type those in. So before we do the next video, I'll put some of my paragraphs in to kind of match what you're going to do here in class. Real quickly, I just want to mention something. I've got a couple of JavaScripts. One will randomize this picture when you load. The other will create a sequencer where the picture will keep changing. And to do that, you're going to have a bunch of images, at least 4 or 5. And it's very important that you actually use this ID of biopic, because the JavaScript code will be looking for that. So I think probably what I'll do is I'll make an extra video, and then if you want to do that, that'll be optional, and you can do that anytime this week. Okay? All right. I'm just trying to think if we've covered everything that we wanted to do on our first day. I think we probably have. We've got our page up and we can view it. And by the way, I don't have to view it here in Netbeans. You see where it is. It's being served by the local host, which is the local web server that's built into Netbeans. But if I go into my file system and find where I'm storing it here, and this is going to take a second because I've got this all set up and I've got a lot of content. So I have a directory here called Ursula, and then I have the website course, and I'm going to come in there, and there's my day 1 folder for my project, my site, public HTML, and there's the index.html. So that's the master page. And now I'm going to open this, and this should open in Google, which is what my default is. So now I'm actually looking at this on the local file. If I had any script or anything in here, it wouldn't probably work very well here. It's going to work better in Netbeans. And of course, it'll work when I put it on an actual server. Okay, so again, as I explained, we create these files and we put them on the server, and then people use the web address, the URL, to access them. Okay, I think that's pretty good for today. I feel like I've forgotten something, but it'll probably flesh out in the wash, so to speak. So I hope you're enjoying this. I think this will be a lot. We might not be able to do all this in our first session, but you'll be able to watch it in the video, and then we can always catch up on the second day and finish things. All right, take care.